Welcome. It's been 36 years. When you look back on your career, what are some of the highlights?
Well, a lot of things happened during those 36 years. A highlight for me was when I joined, and you remember those first days in patrol, working the downtown east side. Anything's exciting. Even taking a burglary report when somebody got broken into and it's a cold break-in, that was memorable. Of course, I had a chance to work in school liaison, working with youth in the early 80s. I enjoyed that. The year as a detective was really a highlight. Some of the cases we had in terms of robbery, jewelry store investigations, some pretty major cases. And I made the mistake of writing for promotion 1 year too early because I got promoted out of the detective office and made sergeant.
Why is that a mistake?
Well, frontline detective work, you have the cases that come before you, you put your creativity to it, you think of ways to catch the bad guy, put the case together so you can go to court. That was a fun year. And then, well, as chief, lots of highlights, including the Olympic year and a lot of those other arrests and great work that my people did, that I got to live off the thrill of it vicariously.
So how has policing changed in Vancouver over the course of your career?
Well, there's major changes in terms of the technical difficulty in terms of putting cases before the courts. When we say paperwork, now it's all typed out in digital format. But what you have to satisfy in terms of evidence before the prosecutors will accept the charge is pretty significant. In my early days, we laid our own charges. It wasn't that difficult to get a case to go to court. Another thing, of course, the technology has changed in terms of police officers. It used to be pen and paper. Now we've got computer systems. You can not only file reports from the field, but you can access it remotely. And I think the city has changed a lot too. One of the big problems we've always had is the downtown east side. In the early 80s, when I patrolled the downtown east side, you had alcoholics. You had, of course, some drugs, but that was sort of hidden. Now, in those days, you didn't have the massive numbers of drug addicts. You didn't have the mentally ill that we had to deal with. So even today, not just the downtown east side, but throughout the city, a big problem for us is dealing with difficult calls with somebody with a mental health crisis.
Despite some of these changes about making it harder to get a case to go to court and the mental illness component or portion of the police work that you're doing now, is Vancouver safer than it was back when you first started, though?
I do think it's safer. And when you look at the numbers of violent crime, when you look at the perception of safety among citizens in Vancouver and the reputation certain neighborhoods used to have that don't have that anymore. I'll show the numbers in terms of violent crime falling, but look at the homicide rate. The last 3 years, we've had below double digits, the lowest rates on record in our city. You go back to 1991, we had 41 homicides. Last year we had 9, the year before we had 6.
Why? What happened?
Well, I think a lot of the credit goes to the police officers that have focused on violent crime. So the police board gives us broad direction that says drive down crime. Then we leave it to different commanders, whether you're a patrol district commander or the homicide team leader or the organized crime section inspector. They put their heads together. And one of the things that we've done in Vancouver is focus on potential problems. So we have a gang violence incident, like a dead body in the street. Trying to solve that homicide, gang related, after it's occurred is very difficult. We've done it, but it's very time consuming. And so about 5-6 years ago, we started to focus on those people who are likely to shoot somebody. And we engage in proactive policing projects, and we'll get them from either beating up their girlfriend to dangerous driving to anything we can, weapons offenses, before they go out and shoot somebody else. And that said too, partnerships. There's so many more volunteers that help us, but the bar scene in downtown Vancouver used to be notorious with gang members. But now we have Bar Watch, we have Restaurant Watch, and it's a collective community police response to telling gangsters they're not welcome in Vancouver, and I think that drives down gang violence.
Now, some people would say that you just drove it out of the city and it went somewhere else. What do you say to that?
I'd argue that when you look at the pie of crime, you can make it smaller. So, yeah, sometimes some people will move. They'll move into Vancouver because of pressure elsewhere too. But I think we just reduce the opportunities to be a gangster, to be tough, to think that you own different cities or different bars or locations, and make it unpopular to be a gangster. So that's something that we focused on. And also a lot of these guys are in jail because of our projects. And we work in partnership with the RCMP and other police agencies. And when we look at charts of the gang members that were engaging it in 2008, 2009, and now, a lot of them are either in jail or dead. The numbers are lower. The pie is smaller.
When you take a look at the vast array of community projects that you also have police officers participating in, both on the clock and as volunteers, what role does that play?
Well, I've always said that we don't police the community, we police with the community. And that means getting people to support our programs, getting people to volunteer, and also feeling that it's their responsibility as well, not just to phone 911 when they see something suspicious, but to engage in neighborhood patrols. We have Pooch Patrol, we have volunteers that will help us during many events. We have Citizens Crime Watch. And just to have those extra eyes and ears is very, very important. We have community policing centers, 10 of them in Vancouver, and the number of volunteers, the projects they get out there, the leaflets they distribute, they're just an amazing force multiplier for us. They do speed watch boards to cut down speeds. You just name it, and we have volunteers helping us out.
So when you entered this job as chief, did you come in with an objective? Did you say, here's how I can envision improving morale, here's how I envision changing the nature of the police force, here's how I envision making the city safer? And if so, what was that vision and how close are you to realizing it?
We came up with a vision to make Vancouver Canada's safest major city. I definitely feel we're closer. The overall crime rate's fallen each year that I've been police chief. Some years it's fallen quite dramatically. And some people say, well, it's falling everywhere, right? We can show charts, it's falling faster in the city of Vancouver. So we have a strategic plan. We talked about our major objectives, and we separated out things like property crime, violent crime, working on gangs and guns, and also human resource practices, like making this a supportive workplace so the employees feel empowered to do the work they need to do and that they feel they have the support and the funding. Funding is really important. If you don't have the resources to engage in longer term projects, to do work overtime, you're not going to be successful in those projects. So City Council has been very supportive of the police department, invested the money in us, and I think it's translated into a safer city.
When you first joined the police force, what was your level of education? What was the requirement then versus what it is today? Would you have been hired?
I don't think I've been hired. I joined
if you joined today. Yeah.
I joined as a 19-year-old, and I had 1 year of university. And the academy class I had two other 19-year-olds and a handful of 20-year-olds. The oldest guy in our class was 29, which was the maximum age. Today, our average age of hiring is 27. I would say 3/4 of the candidates, recruits, have university degrees. They have work experience, they have volunteer experience. It's way more competitive to get into the police department now than it's ever been. In my day, they were just trying to get people into the department because, I'll give you the era, in 1979, they had a huge number of people that retired because they joined after World War II. They were veterans fighting in World War II. They did their 30, 35 years, and they were retiring, and so they had to bring a lot of 19-year-olds like me on. So the timing worked out well for me back then.
When you first started, how many people other than Caucasian males were in the police force? What was the percentage of the makeup of the police force?
Well, it was definitely dominated by Caucasian males who were all really big guys. And I guess in those days they were hiring them to break up the bar fights, and they thought it was a rough and tumble type of work, and the court process wasn't as complex.
The diversity in the police force, it wasn't much back then.
No, it was just a handful of people, I can count them on one hand, who were not Caucasian. So that's all changed. So today, of course, you look at every academy class, there's a good mix of people that represent Vancouver, including women. We're 24% women, highest ratio among major Canadian police agencies.
Right now in the force, 24% women.
24% women, yeah.
Why is that important from a policing perspective, that you have a force that is truly representative of the community that it's in charge of?
Well, the community needs to see themselves in the police department, the police organization. If there's that gulf where they think that we're an occupying army or we're different than the community, I think that can breed resentment. And a great example of that is Ferguson, Missouri right now in the U.S., where you had pretty much an all Caucasian police force, all white, and the black community. And there was the tensions and no connection, and over time that just erupted, and now, the riots they had there. Not every jurisdiction has that problem. Los Angeles police are very diverse. In fact, they have a high ratio of Hispanic officers, black officers. They are actually, as a big major city, getting along very well with the community. So it happens elsewhere too, but I think it's very important in Vancouver as well.
There's, just because of the riots that are happening in the United States right now, it's important, I think, for us to look at those and say there's really no connection between that and some of the hooliganism that happened in 1994 and then also with the last Stanley Cup riots. Is there? Can you draw parallels?
Well, they're all different. And, remember, people were protesting during Occupy. And in some cities, Occupy, there was some violence. There was also criticism of the police because they argued that the police started it with the protesters. So in Vancouver, of course, Occupy did end peacefully because we allow lawful protest. In Ferguson, Missouri, I think it's race-related. Recently, Baltimore had riots. From what I've seen from the news reports, it's teenage hooliganism. And there isn't really a specific cause. They just use some incident as a flashpoint. Our riots and the hockey sports riots are similar in Vancouver, 94, 2011. Very similar to what Europe experienced after their soccer games and the hooliganism there. So, as I've said many times in 2011, we've held lots of rioters accountable. Over 300 people have been charged. We had to set the deterrence so people understand they can't do that again.
Was that a difficult time for you, though, because there was so much pressure that was being heaped on you to go out and get these people and get them now, and yet you took a measured approach. But it must have been challenging.
Well, I remember sitting in the office, and there's pressure from many groups, including the community, including members of my own family, that says, let's charge these rioters and get it over with and get them through the courts. And so first of all, I know what the justice system is like here. And my own officers came to me and said, Chief, we have to wait. We have to analyze all the video. And the reason they gave was that they didn't want to take a case to court with one piece of the evidence and then come back with another piece of the evidence and a third piece of the evidence, because that opens up a defense of not only double jeopardy, but also abuse of process. They said, get all the evidence, go once, and then it's likely there'll be a guilty plea. And so I said, okay, well, that's the right way to do it, but I'm going to get it. Okay, I thought,
and you did.
Yeah, I did. And so in those difficult days, I argued many times, we want to do it fast, we want to do it right, but if we can't have both, then we're just going to do it right.
When we also take a look at a year earlier with the Olympics, there was a breakout of a potential skirmish on Georgia Street, but you seem to quell that quickly, and then the rest of the experience with the Olympics must be one of the highlights of your career.
There's a story behind the arrests on that opening morning, is the night before at the opening ceremonies, because we drew a line that the protesters were not going to disrupt the opening ceremony at Beatty and Robson. The commander on the street that day decided we're not going to show up in helmets and batons. We're going to wear soft hats. We're going to not have face shields on. We're going to be as presenting a upbeat, positive image as possible. Now, the anarchists in the crowd were trying to incite others. They were in the front lines throwing stuff at the police officers, and they were saying things like, the cops are beating up the native elders, right? Whereas the legitimate protesters that were there recognized the police were doing our job and were allowing them to protest. So the next day when the anarchists and the black bloc types appeared again, they didn't have legitimate protesters to hide behind. The legitimate protesters weren't mad at us. And so when those anarchists and black bloc types are on their own, it was easy to move in and make the arrests.
So why has it been so important to you to create an environment where you say to somebody who wants to protest or smoke marijuana, okay, we're going to let you do that without creating confrontation and then move along?
Well, let me split your point up into two parts, okay?
Yes, I know, I bundled them together, but they're not really.
We facilitate lawful protests. That's the law.
Yeah.
I sat down with business groups and I showed them pictures of people protesting in the 60s, protesting against segregation. I showed them the picture of the guy blocking the road in Tiananmen Square, right? You think about that. There's many examples where protests have helped achieve social progress. So it's a law. We facilitate lawful protests. Yeah, there's times when it's inconvenient to others. And that's when we try to intervene and use the best skills we can to say, okay, move on, cars have to get through, please don't occupy this intersection. And we've got a good relationship with the protest groups, so they're usually willing to do that. The annual marijuana protest.
Yes.
So first of all, we can't make a judgment call on this is a good protest, this is not. There obviously is political movements to legalize marijuana. So then we have to look at proportionality. Do I tie up a police officer for 4 hours? Now they're not in the streets trying to protect others, and they're going to put a big case together for possession of marijuana. It goes to community court, and it'll probably be diverted. And it's not going to have any deterrent effect. So we just try to stand by and keep the peace and prevent any escalation of violence or other harms. That's what we're trying to do.
The issue of marijuana continues to come up, of course, because now the city of Vancouver is looking at saying, well, we're going to issue a business license, which brings about a response from the federal minister saying, well, no, you shouldn't be doing that. And in fact, the police should be cracking down on this. Why are we in the position that we're in right now with the current stance? Like, what's your thinking on why don't we go into those shops and shut them down?
What we're doing is assessing every, quote, dispensary. And if we believe that there's harm in terms of selling to children or community complaints or wanton disregard that causes potential violence or safety issues, we will take some enforcement investigation action. We've got numerous investigations underway. We've got them involving gang violence. We have them involving the fentanyl that's been lacing a lot of drugs lately. Mm-hmm. We have the crystal meth. We have clan labs. We have the cartels. We have people distributing crack cocaine. There's way more severe drugs in this city that could generate violence that I think we need to work on. And I'm hard pressed to say cancel that serious investigation against that organized crime figure who's violent and go work on the dispensary right now. Especially because the law around the dispensaries, it'll take some time to get some direction from the courts.
Quickly tell me a little bit about your life. You were born in Shanghai, as I understand. How old were you when you came to Canada? Why did your parents come here?
I came to Canada when I was 3 years old, and my family were considered refugees. We came from communist China, and during 1962, there was a border, the border opened up between communist China and Hong Kong. So my mother made it through to Hong Kong at that time, and then my father applied to get myself and my older sister out. So we were in Hong Kong for about 6 months, and he actually had worked as an interpreter for the U.S. government, U.S. Army, the Flying Tigers, and so he thought he would try and ask to come to or go to the United States, saying I used to work in the Army Air Group, and they said no. And so then he went to the Canadian Embassy, and they said, like, they literally rolled a red carpet. And they said, you're wonderful, especially because he spoke English.
Yes.
I found out a couple of years ago, it's a long story, but somehow I met a historian who said, you're one of 100 refugee families that came to Canada in 1962. And if you write to the Ottawa archives, there's a box with your family's file in it. So I wrote away, and I got 100 pages of my family's history because an immigration officer was watching everything we were doing, because we lived in Calgary, we lived in Peterborough, then in Vancouver, because it was so unusual to have the immigrants from communist China. So it's kind of an amazing window into my family's life early in the 1962-63 timeframe. So
you joined the police force. It has also played an important role in your personal life as well.
Well, I joined the police department when I was 19 years old. I grew up in East Vancouver, and when I graduated, I remember sitting at the squad table after a day of training. One end of the room was what I called the belle of the ball, a young policewoman. All the guys are crowded around with her, and then me and the other guy were sitting at the other end. You just don't talk unless they talk to you, and it was your first time out. Anyway, that policewoman was Vicky, who I married a few years later. And someone asked me recently, what was the best thing that happened to you in the police department? I said, meeting my wife, Vicky.
And between you had 4 children.
Yep.
And how did you manage to raise 4 children when you're both working on the police force? Because this is not a straight 9 to 5, Monday to Friday job.
Yeah, we were in the 4 days on, 3 days off system. She would work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I work Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. and we wouldn't have a day off together. But we did that just for childcare purposes. Now, we had a nanny in those days, but you could only work a nanny so many hours. And so it was obviously very challenging. A few years, when the kids were young, she took some maternity leaves, and also she was one of the first officers allowed to job share. So they said, you can job share, but not in patrol. You have to work in the jail. So she worked in the jail for about 3 years. When it was like, all different shifts, but at half time. And it's an assignment that no one else wanted to do. So that's how her and her job share partner got it. And I'm happy to say our thinking around accommodating women in policing has advanced quite a bit since those days.
How important has she been to you in your ability to achieve your potential throughout your career?
Well, she's been amazing. And for me, when I was a younger police officer, I was going back to school, finishing my undergraduate degree, and then I told her when I finished that, I want to finish my graduate degree. And so a lot of times when I wasn't at work, I was at class, and when I wasn't at class, I was sitting doing an assignment or reading a book or studying. So she was an amazing support in those years. And I really think once my school was over, she had some thoughts about, advancing, writing some promotion exams. And because of family requirements, because I was busy, she took a back seat to my career. And so absolutely would not be where I am without her early support. Support over all the years.
People are saying you're beloved as a chief. People look at you and go, you are the face of the Vancouver Police Department, and you've done such a remarkable job. Why leave?
When things are good, then don't overstay your welcome. For a number of reasons, I thought it was the right time. I had some excellent deputy chiefs that were being actively sought for jobs elsewhere. I didn't want them to leave, and then now you got to worry about succession planning. So I could leave and know the department was in great hands. I was super pleased to see Adam Palmer become the new chief, but it came down to two finalists, Doug Lepard and Adam Palmer. They supported each other, and in the end, Doug said, look, I want Adam to have the job, and he pulled out. So
How remarkable is that?
Yeah, well, I think that shows the cohesion in our leadership ranks. It wasn't always like that. There were times in the history of the VPD where there's tension among executive members. So that's one thing. Also at age 55, I got time to do something else. And 8 years as chief, I've said this, count that as dog years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And I think also you can outstay your welcome. I'm leading a large organization, and you want to encourage officers. You want to give them the pep talks and everything. But at a certain time, sometimes they tune out the coach. So I think for many good reasons, it was the right time.
I think that your time as chief will be remembered fondly by the people of Vancouver and also by the members of the Vancouver Police Force. Thank you for your service.
Thanks,
It's been a
Steve.
pleasure knowing you.
Thank you.